Always gets them every time. Hello everyone. Welcome to the first meeting of the Space Association for 2020. Can you believe we're saying 2020? My name is Michael Abdillah. I'm the Vice President of the Space Association, for those that don't know me. Welcome tonight to our first meeting for the year. And so our meeting is called 2020 Vision, and the idea is that we're looking ahead at what's happening in space in this momentous year. So tonight's program will start with our usual association business, where we talk about events and activities, plans of the association. At about 7:15, we'll have our feature, 2020 Vision, what to expect this year in space, and Angelo will be presenting that. That will take us right through to the break. So whenever Angelo stops speaking, or 8:30, whichever comes first, we'll have a bit of a break. After that, Shane Usher, one of our members, sitting at the back there, he will be giving a presentation on Expedition Boomerang. Shane participated in a 2-week program over in Utah at the Mars Desert Research Station last year, and so we'll be getting an inside report on what that was all about. At about 9:10, Andrew Rennie will give us an update on planetary and space science, and he will also sort of focus on those planetary missions that are coming up in 2020, as well as some other interesting things. And hopefully we'll finish at about 10 o'clock tonight, and we should be all finished. Okay, so that's tonight. Now, I want to talk about a couple of things that are coming up in terms of events and activities for the year before we get into what's happening in space in 2020. One of the things is the Moon Village Association is putting on a public forum on the moon. And the Space Association is sort of working in partnership with the Moon Village Association. And they're putting on a mini public forum. And there's going to be a number of speakers, and then there's going to be a sort of a public discussion. And they're going to talk about the fact that there are many governments and companies who are interested in going back to the moon in the coming years, and the Moon Village Association is interested in having a conversation about what that means. Also, the Moon Village Association is planning to launch a camera to the moon for a live video stream for one day of the whole Earth. I think this is about trying to draw attention to the fact that we're going back to the moon, but to draw attention to the fact that we need to think about and look after the Earth. So I think that's kind of the theme as I understand it. And so the conversation will be about, not just about the sort of mechanics of going to the moon and what that means, but also what are the deeper philosophical issues and so forth that are involved.
Michael,
Haven't they heard of our goal? That's right. Maybe we could get him to speak. So there are some of the speakers there. Dr. Alice Gorman, who we know, and a couple of others who, to be honest, I don't know. The details: the MVA Public Forum is on Wednesday the 26th of February from 6:15 to 8:15 p.m. It's at the M Pavilion, which, to be honest, I've never heard of, in the Queen Victoria Gardens, St Kilda Road, Melbourne. Now, notice there that there are only 60 seating spaces available only, and 200 standing spaces. So it's a very sort of, avant-garde kind of place. But there'll be, we'll make some information available on our website and through the usual means. So if you're interested in that. So, what can people tell me about? This is the second question for the night. The significance of Apollo 13 in 2020. Yeah. So this year will be the 50th anniversary of Apollo 13. Apollo 13 launched on April 11, 1970 and splashed down on April 17 in 1970, so it's 50 years. In 2020, that's roughly over the Easter long weekend. So I believe that the 11th of April is Easter Saturday, and then the 17th of April is the following Friday. The Space Association is in discussions with our friends at the Sun Theatre in Yarraville, who we worked with to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Apollo 11 in July last year. And we are also in talks with some of our space tracking friends from Canberra, and we're thinking of putting together something probably at the Sun Theatre, and possibly involving the Apollo 13 movie or something else. So we're in discussions with that. So look out for that. The only, as I say, the only issue with it is that the actual dates fall across the Easter long weekend. That may be a problem for some. Some people might be going away, but look out for that one. Now, there is a documentary film has been produced called Searching for Skylab, America's Forgotten Triumph. This film was directed and produced by a couple of expat Australians, Dwight Stephen Bonecki and his wife Alex. They currently live in Germany, I believe, and they put this movie out sometime last year. It was released, and just last week, I think it was, they were actually in Australia and they had a screening of it in Canberra at Questacon. So we've been in touch with Stephen, and we're hoping to be able to do something around screening this film sometime this year. Again, no dates are locked in or anything like that, but it's just an idea that we are exploring. Peter Aylward and I met Stephen and Alex at Starfest 9 in July 2018, and at that time they were showing an early draft of the movie, and they were getting comments from people. I forget what the correct term is when you do that, but they were actually taking comments from all the people at Starfest, and then they were going back to re-edit and to remaster the film and to complete it. So this is an Australian guy, interesting chap, and I've got a little clip here if you're interested, just to see what it's all about.
We watched the launch from the roof of the manned space operations building.
Skylab has cleared the tower.
Launched up. Something bad was
This is
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Maybe we'll give it a miss. Okay. So anyway, look out for searching for Skylab. lost in the Western Australian outback. Just a reminder to listen to the Space Association's The Space Show, which is a weekly 1-hour radio program about space and astronomy on 88.3 Southern FM. It's streamed live and podcast for a week afterwards. The Space News segment is podcast on SAA TV, our YouTube channel. We have our Space Association public meetings, which are also streamed live and then podcast, or vidcast, I should say. And we're always looking for guest speakers, suggestions and offers. So if anyone would like to be part of that, then please come forward. So just a quick look at our 2020 meetings. Remember that the formula is the fourth Monday of the month except for December, and these are the dates for the rest of the year. And that means that our next meeting is on Monday, the 24th of February. If you're interested in joining the association, please join up either tonight or go online at space.asn.au to either renew or to join. Now, one of the things that we've been doing in recent times is we've been having an item where we look at the Australian Space Agency and where we just look at some of the news items that have taken place in the last few months. So the Australian Space Agency has closed its application for the first round of the New Space Grants Program. And this program allocates funds of $100,000 to $4 million to eligible Australian companies and research institutions. And it's all about building capacity in the Australian space industry, and in particular it's about engaging with international space agencies and or their supply chains. Now, this grants program, you may or may not have heard, was launched back in the April federal budget last year. It's not big. It's only $15 million over 3 years. $3 million in 2019-20, $5 million in 2020-21, and $7 million in 2021-22. And those seeking to be funded under the grants program have to demonstrate that at least a minimum of 80% of the investment will be made in Australia for the benefit of Australian space industry firms. So it's an interesting initiative of the Australian Space Agency. As I said, the first round has closed just recently, and there'll be other rounds to come. Since our last meeting in November, the Australian Space Agency signed a statement of strategic intent and cooperation with the Australian rocket company Gilmour Space Technologies. You may know that Gilmour Space is developing hybrid rockets to launch small satellites into Earth orbit, and they're aiming to do so by 2022. And they're currently scaling up their production facilities. They have a new facility in the Gold Coast. So the Australian Space Agency is hoping that this agreement is intended to be part of promoting a sustainable space ecosystem in Australia and provide world-class capabilities to the growing global small satellite industry.
I don't think they received any.
Yep.
But I don't believe. I think this
No,
is
this is a separate. This is a completely separate
this
thing.
is just like hey guys, we love each other.
Correct.
There was no
Correct.
nothing tangible really for anybody.
That's correct. Yep.
And they've got a lot of these agreements, the space agency.
Correct. Yep. Okay, and finally tonight is congratulations to one of the Space Association of Australia's members, Kerry Doherty, who was awarded an OAM, an Order of Australia medal, in yesterday's Australia Day Honours list. So she received the Medal of the Order of Australia in the General Division. I'm not sure what's happening. And this was for service to astronautical history as a curator. We all know Kerry is an independent space historian, a curator and writer, and she's currently doing that. We also know that she was the curator of space technology at the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences, the Powerhouse Museum in Sydney, from 1983 to 2014. She's also a very active member of the International Academy of Astronautics. She's a co-chair of some of the committees, member of some of the others. She's edited several volumes of History of Rockets and Astronautics, and she's also a member of the Education and Outreach Committee. She's also been a lecturer at the Department of Space Humanities International Space University since 2001. She's a member of the National Space Society of Australia and the Space Association of Australia. Her most recent exhibition, some of you may remember, was From the Outback to Outer Space, Boomerang, 1955 to 1980, which was held at the State Library of South Australia back in 2017. So the year that the IAC, the International Astronautical Congress, was held in Adelaide, and the Australian Space Agency was announced, that same year there was this big exhibition at the State Library of South Australia that Kerry was responsible for putting together about Woomera. And she is the author of Australia in Space and Space Australia. And we've had that book, Australia in Space, here for sale. We still have it for sale on our website. And it's a fabulous book about the history of space in Australia. Okay, so that's the end of our introduction, and now I'd like to ask Angelo to come up and talk.
Talk. All right. Thanks, Mike. Hopefully the sound will be a bit better than we had before, otherwise might not be quite as long a speech. Here we go. Where are we?
I can try and rig up the thing that we normally use to prevent that noise.
That's okay. It doesn't happen that often.
That's because I'm tuning it a lot. Okay.
Run.
Yep.
Okay. Well, welcome to 2020. This is going to be a big year, as they say, and more importantly, welcome to the next. Welcome to the next decade, because it's going to be even bigger. It's next year. All right. Well, let's not start splitting hairs here, but let's get straight into it. We'll start off with Australian Space. The Australian Space Agency news. They have actually moved into their new headquarters in Adelaide, I believe, and it's in the old Adelaide Hospital site. Not sure if it's a new building, old building. I don't even know where it is on that plan, but they're there somewhere. So they are certainly doing their stuff.
How many chairs have they got?
Don't know yet.
Bums on seats?
Don't know. Moving on, Gilmore Space. As Michael said, they'd signed an agreement, and as David said, no money has changed hands. But interestingly enough, when NASA was dealing with the early Blue Origins and the SpaceXs, they were the kind of agreements that NASA used to make. We'll help you, but we're not going to give you any money. So, who knows? You know, from little things, big things come. Signing was at the company's new facility, as Mike alluded to, at the Gold Coast. They are developing hybrid rockets to launch by 2022, as Mike said. In the last 2.5 years, the company has successfully testified its hybrid rocket engine. completed tests of semi-autonomous mobile launch platform, raised 2 rounds of venture capital funding, signed a Space Act agreement with NASA as well, probably no money as well, tripled its team to 45. So, you know, they're kind of the shakers and movers so far. Go on, David. What are you going to say?
No, just a statement of fact. A substantial number of 45 are unpaid interns.
I believe it. Exactly. Okay, and there's a particular rocket. There's another group, going to the square kilometre array. Some further news. The plans are just about finalised. Sorry? Don't know. It's a good question. So it's actually, it's probably going to start construction next year. It's the world's largest radio telescope. There's 13 nations involved, including China, Italy, Netherlands, etc., etc. Thousands of antennas across the world, with central cores of operation in Western Australia and South Africa. The total collective area, funny that, is about a square kilometre, which will make it 50 times more sensitive than any of the existing radio telescopes. So big things will come from this too. But as usual, there is a little bit of a problem. There is money. But the core site is in WA, run by the CSIRO. Is 250 million euros short of funding needed to build a full observatory. So this year they're trying to sort of get the money to fund the whole development.
Over 1 million dishes in total.
That's a lot of dishes. And I'm not sure if they all look like this, Len. Can you explain the difference between this picture and that picture?
Yeah, I believe the earlier ones are part of what's called the ASCAP, which is the Pathfinder array, which they're already up and running. They're using it near Murchison to test out various sensitivities and things. But ultimately, you'll have 1 million of those things in this concept around the world, mainly in South Africa and Australia.
Yeah, it's an exciting project, and it keeps us, or keeps Australia, or gets Australia back to where it used to be preeminent, which was radio.
Astronomy, not the type of space sciences we're interested in. In astronomy, Australia has always punched above its weight.
Okay, and we continue to do so. So good on Australia for that one. There's a little.
That won't work because once Elon completes his Faraday cage around the world, no
All right, moving on. There's a company called Titomic. This this is an Australian company. It's actually has assembled the world's largest titanium rocket via additive manufacturing, i.e. 3D printing. It's Melbourne-based company unveiled a 5.5 metre rocket at Formnext, the world's premier 3D printing trade show in Frankfurt in Germany recently. Represents the world's largest additive manufactured titanium part, made of just under 28 hours using their particular technology. I actually saw a video, I haven't got it here, but it's an incredible video to watch that machine work. It really does well, and it's making products out of titanium. It says the technology can also be used to manufacture a full-scale rocket in about 165 hours, like the full-scale Gilmour Space Technologies AirSS rocket, and achieve build rates of up to 30 kilos per hour compared to a melt-based metal additive process with print volumes of less than a kilogram per hour. So it's pretty advanced there. So again, very good. And as the managing director said, with the falling price of titanium powder, Australia, also with its exchange rate, is in a prime position to lead a little revolution there if it takes advantage of it. So that's a good thing. Now, I don't know if that's what it printed, but that was the picture that it was associated with the particular article. The other one was Sky and Space Global. You might know these guys, but they've actually really had trouble getting funding, and they've shrunk the number of CubeSats that they are going to put into space. They wanted to launch 200, but now they've gone to lower than that. But again, struggles. It's like most of these startup companies, they always struggle getting money.
There's a few people in that game now, like Fleet Systems. So it's going to become a crowded market.
Yes, exactly. Now, exciting things though, over the ditch there, over into New Zealand. This is a shaker and mover, this company. I actually getting quite fond of what they do. They've got the Electron rocket. You see it there, and they launch from the northeast corner of New Zealand in a nice windswept launch site. But it successfully launched some satellites in in December. Running out of fingers was the name that was given to it, in a mission that also tested the ability to recover electrons first stage. So there's the first innovation. First they launch from New Zealand, which is an amazing feat in itself. They do get funded from American. They're a part American company. But now they're looking at recovering their systems. It lifted off from the New Zealand launch site and placed 7 small sats into low Earth orbit. Electron's first stage was upgraded for this mission to test these enabling technologies of recovery. The launch was the 6th and final for the year and the 10th overall. It debuted an autonomous flight termination system, another innovation for them, to enable a higher launch cadence and deliver responsive launch capability. So what it is you don't need the bloke at the end of a button to blow it up if it's going off course or whatever. It will do it automatically. SpaceX have had that for a while now, but it does improve safety quite considerably. There you have it. Now this is what they're proposing. The recovery mechanism is basically a parachute, and you come along with a helicopter, and you do what was done many decades ago. You grab it and bring it back down. And it used to do it in the 60s with the American spy satellites. Corona, correct.
And some of the Discovery series.
Correct. So it's a tri-technology, and I suspect they'll probably pull it off. When they actually launched it, the idea was to see how much damage was incurred in the re-entry, but it was quite well. Was not a problem, so they should be able to get these back. The other thing is that they've also now commissioned a launch complex 2 at Wallops Island in Virginia, so they've got another launch site. They're probably going to launch this year. The Air Force will be its first customer, and the launch site is designed primarily for US government customers who want to conduct launches from American soil and who are interested in responsive launch capabilities. These guys want to get up to a sort of a launch a week, and they're slowly building up their facilities and their capability to do that. And the American Air Force is very keen on rapid response.
Will they have the same vulnerabilities to weather as SpaceX and other launches?
Will they have the which?
Same vulnerabilities to weather.
Probably. Probably. There it is, at Wallops Island. Rocket Lab will build a second launch pad in New Zealand. It started construction of that pad already. The second pad is based on the existing. It's also opened a new US headquarters in Long Beach. It's building that facility now and expects to be completed by the second quarter. The new headquarters will facilitate production of Electron rockets and their Rutherford main engines. Long Beach is already home for another big company, Virgin Orbit. And there is that pad. You'll see it at the top. There's just a little sort of baby pad, a bit like pad 39A at Cape Canaveral. So there's certainly, this is the facility in Auckland. I think this is still in Auckland, but they're duplicating that at Long Beach. So they're certainly not putting all their eggs in one basket. They're diversifying. And there's the manager there, the CEO, Peter Beck. Now, the first launch of 2020 will be coming up. It'll be a National Reconnaissance Office launch for the US government. The launch opens on January 31st, so we're due for launch very shortly. The New Zealand government is also updating the rules on what kind of satellites can be launched from the country. The new rules prohibit the launch of satellites that support nuclear weapons programs, serve as space weapons or other military uses contrary to government policy, or cause serious or irreversible harm to the environment. Rocket Lab said the updated guidelines are in alignment with its own policies regarding the safe and responsible use of space. I suspect that's why Wallops Island has been put into place. Okay, let's talk about some big news that will impact on the coming decade. Just, if you don't know, the budget has been approved by Congress, but before that, Jim Bridenstine pleaded to Congress to provide the funding so that they can produce a human-rated lunar lander. He wanted the $1 billion NASA sought for the lunar landing program to keep the companies involved in the early stages of the program, mitigating potential cost increases down the road. He warned that if they didn't do that, then the deadline of 2024 of getting to the moon might not be met. NASA's leadership went on to say that the use of any funding shortfalls as an excuse was not going to be used as an excuse for meeting the goal. So they said before it was approved, the budget was approved, if they got less, they wouldn't use that as an excuse for not trying to get man on the moon. Jim Bridenstine and Doug Lavero, who's the NASA Associate Administrator, vowed to look at creative solutions should NASA not get all the money. Probably take it out of other science programs, who knows, or something like that. Vice President Mike Pence, in support of NASA's budget, also said he was counting on an increased public interest in space to motivate additional funding needed for return to the moon. He said it's going to fire the imagination of American people again and create a tremendous amount of excitement. With that public support, he argued he was confident Congress would give him the $1 billion that they were looking for the lunar lander. Neither NASA nor the White House has actually provided the ultimate cost of that, of the lunar lander program. So getting to the moon in 2024 was definitely an expensive exercise, and we're talking about yearly increases of, $5 or more billion, which was never going to happen. So what was the result? The result was a little bit of a half. But you'll notice there that the billion that they wanted, they actually got 600 million. So Congress has approved to fund the lunar program. However, what they did say is we don't want to go there in 2024, we want to go there in 2028. And hence the stretching out of some of the cash flow. What? Yeah, anyway, so this is a graph which was an interesting graph which shows the increase of the NASA budget slowly over time. You'll see the low point was 2013, but ever since it's been rising. The NASA has asked for a certain amount of money, often every year, supported by the Trump administration. It goes to Congress, and lo and behold, they add more money.
But in what dollars? Are they corrected dollars?
Yeah, they're current day dollars. Yes.
So all those figures there are in current dollars.
I believe so. Yes. Okay. Yes, they are. They've been de-escalated accordingly. The spending bill gives NASA $22.6 billion in 2020, but doesn't provide the agency all the funding it sought. The bill includes full funding for many elements of the agency's exploration plans, but offered just $600 million, as I said, for the landers. NASA sought $1 billion, only got $600. The bill funds several earth science and astrophysics projects. It's also provided $15 million for low Earth orbit commercialisation effort. Was a 5.3% increase. SLS, now, surprise, surprise. SLS funding increased. What a surprise. It was to some extent. In particular, when they start looking at the options of SpaceX with a true and tried rocket in Falcon Heavy. So the Congress just love this program. It's a money pit, but they love it. Historic high levels of funding, which is the good news for robotic planetary science missions. So they have funded Mars 2020, Europa Clipper, 2 Discovery missions, and the newly selected Dragonfly mission to Titan. They were all funded, so that was definitely good news. And they've started the ball rolling on the I guess the holy grail for all scientists in America is the Mars Sample Return campaign. Planetary defence budget grew slightly. DART. I think they're looking at a telescope for near Earth orbit objects. I think they got a little bit of money for that, but not much.
Yeah, it's near Earth objects, but is that passive or active? Like if they find one that they think is heading our way.
Well, they'll know about it when Apophis comes through. When is it? 2025. Focus on Mars in the early 30s. So they've basically said we want to go to Mars in the 30s. Overall, I'd sort of give it a 7 out of 10. Not a bad budget. Space station, moving on. CSR-19 recently returned. Astronauts have been pretty busy there, fixing a few problems, and they just recently fixed some batteries. But they had to do all this because in February, I don't know if you know, but station occupants go down to 3. Hence the need to get on with this commercial space quick. Doctors...
One American and 2 Russians.
I think so, yes. Doctors on Earth treated an astronaut on the ISS recently with a blood clot. And that was interesting by just giving him more blood-thinning products. But they obviously are looking at this kind of medicine moving up. The astronaut didn't experience any symptoms, but again, they are going to have to seriously think long-duration missions. This kind of stuff happens, so they've got to get thinking about it. I did read an article on some papers on this type of subject, and so NASA is certainly right into it. NASA General, believe it or not, NASA was voted the best place to work in government for the 8th year in a row.
They've got nothing.
Based on surveys of its employees, it scored 81.5 in the index, which I thought, wow, must be a great company to work for. NASA astronaut Christine Cocken set a spaceflight record recently. She was one of the spacewalkers in repairing the space station. Cock eclipsed the record of the longest single spaceflight by a woman on Saturday with her 289th day in space. Cock is scheduled to spend 328 days in space, returning in February. Cock broke the record that had been set by Peggy Whitson, who still has a record for cumulative time in space of 666 days. That's pretty good. There they are. They're the 2 ladies involved. Also, NASA recently graduated its latest class of astronauts. The group of 11 astronauts plus 2 from the Canadian Space Agency completed the 2 years training, and NASA declared that these astronauts to be the first class in the Artemis generation, which is... You want it? Yeah, some in the back and some in the sides there. Let's go to commercial crew because that's the exciting stuff. We have Boeing on the one side who's going through hell and back. They've got more problems than you can poke a stick at, and then you've got SpaceX who seems to be, in the groove again. There they are. That's the Starliner, CST-100 on the left, and Crew Dragon on the right. These are the astronauts that have actually been picked for these missions. 4 of those are involved with the SpaceX, and the rest are with Starliner. We'll talk about Boeing. On the 4th of November last year, we had the pad abort, which, if you recall, the video was just a shocker. I think they were just, complaining that NASA forced them to show that event. On the 17th of December, we had the OFT-1, Orbital Flight Test 1. It launched well, but as soon as it got into orbit, or just before, it had some timing anomalies. And that is still under investigation and was unable to dock to the space station. So the question then is, when is OF2, the manned flight, coming up? Don't know.
The timing anomalies meant that it made the wrong orbit, so there was no way of docking to space.
Yeah, there's a number of... Look, I've read a little bit about it, but that's not the only problem they had, as I understand it. They're now looking at the thrusters. 8 of the thrusters did not fire correctly, and the question was whether it was related to the anomaly or whether we got some dodgy thrusters that they have to fix up. So Boeing are going through hell and back on this. If you recall, when they had the launch pad abort, someone had left one of the pins had left the pin out of one of the parachutes. So the problems just continue, and we won't even go into Boeing's problem with the 737 MAX. We won't go into the fact that the other day they pulled out of a DARPA contract, which was Phantom Express. $150 million down the gurgler. So Boeing, they sacked their CEO, not surprisingly, not long ago. So Boeing are in a bit of strife. And, it worries me because NASA have put most of their faith in Boeing rather than SpaceX. And it turns out that SpaceX is probably the... Now, SpaceX is probably the one that's actually achieving good results at this point. This is a stabilised version of that video that we watched at the launch abort. This is worth watching.
7, 6, 5.
Picture on. 40 killed parachute. Broke parachutes main. SM set.
Unfurling sequence, but 2's enough to bring it down. And it's the only spacecraft that actually lands on land, American spacecraft, because the Soyuz have been doing it since its inception. But, this deploys airbags just as it hits the ground. It drops a shell there. See the heat shield drops, and the bags will inflate just as it hits the ground. So that's a much better video than what we saw on the day. Beautiful. There you go. Okay. There it is. That's that skirt. Incidentally, it relates to aerodynamics. It's if you didn't have that skirt, the rocket below it would probably shake itself to pieces and break up. So that was the solution. It's dead weight, but it works. And there it is. This is the actual launch of the OFT-1 mission. Beautiful launch. Went really well. Here they go. We're mucking around with it. What's this one? Oh, this is in preparation for the launch.
3, 2, 1, and liftoff. The rise of Starliner, a new era in human spaceflight.
Obviously some challenges today. When the spacecraft separated from the launch vehicle, we did not get the orbital insertion burn that we were hoping for.
Starliner touches down in the desert in New Mexico. An historic landing in White Sands, New Mexico concludes the first flight test of Boeing's Starliner spacecraft.
All right, so we showed you this launch live. Boeing Starliner lifted off from Cape Canaveral on December 20th. It was an orbital flight test, but it did not go as planned.
The Starliner ended up having to land at the White Sands Missile Range a couple of days later, but now it is back in Florida. News 6's James Barbero explains what's next for the Starliner.
The last time we saw Starliner in the facility where it was assembled, it was 2 months ago when it was rolled out and out to the launch pad. Of course, a lot has happened since then, including the orbital flight test, the landing in New Mexico. Considering everything, concluding a mission that was cut short, the spaceship looks to be in great shape.
It looks really clean from the standpoint of the wear and tear that it took coming through re-entry.
External inspections are happening now, and then the team says when that's done, they'll take off
That's a kind of sequence. The drogue chutes come out, then the main chutes come out and unfurl in a systematic way, and it drops its heat shield and airbags deploy. That was a picture of it landing. Interestingly, they launched at night and they landed at night, which I thought for a experimental rocket you'd like to see what's going on, but hey. And interestingly enough, on the left you'll see that once it landed they put this little tent around it. Not quite sure the reasoning behind all that, but I know there's a reason. But they have to safe it, of course, because it carries some pretty nasty chemicals in it.
Angelo,
Yeah.
you asked them the reason for the
Yeah, go on.
to protect the thermal insulation tiles so they can reuse it.
Oh, yeah.
They don't want to bump it and so on, so they spent about an hour putting that thing over.
Yeah, they did.
And they explained during that the reason was to protect the thermal protection system.
Okay, interesting. Oh no, it blows sand around there too, and you don't want to wreck the thermal insulation. And there it is after it came back, and there it is with the bags. So what to watch out for in Boeing? Well, OFT, the critical timing and thrusters are now under review. It failed to dock with the ISS. The question mark at the moment is whether NASA will force them to fly another mission. So that's the one you want to watch out for. But Boeing, regardless, Boeing is likely to launch astronauts to the ISS this year. I still reckon that's going to happen.
It'd be interesting to see if they have another flight, if they have the funding. Because they couldn't right now, I don't think.
Oh, Boeing will just stamp on the ground and say, I can't afford it, and NASA will pay the money and they'll keep going.
They'd have to steal Atlas from another, they'd have to just turn them off the line like SpaceX.
I know. So it's going to be an interesting thing. I suspect they won't. They'll allow them to go straight in. As I heard, the timing issue, had there been astronauts on board, they would have overridden the automated systems and put it into a correct orbit. So the astronaut in the loop might be the thing that allows them to go fly. It all depends on the thrusters, what the issue there is. Let's talk SpaceX. We know about demonstration mission 1 that occurred last year. These are the 2 astronauts that are going to fly the demonstration mission 2, Benken and Hurley. And in-flight abort happened not so long ago, on the 19th of January, which is only a few weeks back. So what that does for us is it puts us into an April to June timeline for the first manned flight out of the Cape since Atlantis in 2011, a space shuttle. And the 3rd to the 4th quarter, the first operational mission to the ISS. So, about time. Here we go. This is SpaceX.
Lift off! Oh my God!
There goes look! Whoa! He's tracking it. Watch. Wow! It'll be almost a minute before we hear the sound. It's so far away.
That's right.
Cool. So cool.
Initiated the abort at about 85 seconds in, just past max Q, and it did everything perfectly, and the aerodynamic forces after that just destroyed the rocket, and it blew up.
Lifting off and launching towards a new chapter in the space race. The final test of the SpaceX craft. Seconds in and at supersonic speeds, the abort is triggered.
Miko, Dragon launch escape initiated.
Starting thrusters which propel the capsule away.
And you can hear some really loud...
Moments later, the rocket breaks up.
And there they are. Drogue chutes are out.
And the capsule parachutes to safety.
This is hugely significant. A successful test will mean that that's really the last hurdle for SpaceX in sending humans into space. And the next time we see these images and that splashdown of the Crew Dragon, there will be US astronauts on board.
Catastrophic failure is a scenario NASA never wants to see, but it has to be tested before people are put on board. One former astronaut who's flown 4 missions says it's a major milestone.
The U.S. has been unable to launch our own astronauts into space since 2011 when we retired the space shuttle. So it's been 9 years, coming up on 10 years since we've had that capability. And so this is a big deal.
SpaceX is owned by billionaire Elon Musk, his company working with NASA to fly astronauts to and from the International Space Station. This could now happen within months. A giant leap for NASA and a pivotal point in space exploration. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
3, 2, 1.
Is when the trunk drops off the Crew Dragon. The trunk has got fins on it. That's how they recovered it. So it's pretty intact. And the reason for the trunk is it provides aerodynamic stability to the Dragon when it actually escapes from the troubled rocket. Interestingly enough, that was one of the first boosters they actually recovered or something, and it was a shame that they actually blew it up. It should have gone into a museum, I think, but anyway. It's which? It was the first Block 5, okay. And there's some great pictures. They're the Super Dracos firing, because after they fire, you don't see the flame any further. Like at that point, they're still on, but they've given it enough of a kick to accelerate way past. The data showed the capsule Super Dracos ignited 85 seconds after liftoff and was travelling at about 536 metres a second. The thrusters pushed the capsule away, which surprised me, of a peak acceleration of only 3.3 Gs. So even I could survive that one. So it got comfortable 1.5 kilometres away before the Falcon 9 actually exploded. And there it is after they recovered it. And there's the trunk that we showed you before. And the parachutes, as you know, SpaceX did a hell of a lot of work to make sure these parachutes worked well, and they worked well. I think NASA would be very happy with the performance of that particular mission. So what to watch out for this year? Clearly, April to June, they're going to fly those two astronauts that I showed you before to the space station, starting, you know, flights from American soil, and Boeing won't be that far behind them.
Base launch trajectory countdown net. Pad is clear. Go for launch.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition, liftoff.
Stage separation confirmed. MVAC ignition. Dragon, separation confirmed. Separation visually confirmed. Mains have been deployed.
Now, interestingly enough, you know how the fairings are being, they've attempted to capture those. They have actually captured them with those big ships with the big nets. Well, Elon spoke the other day of perhaps capturing the Dragon with those nets. Now, the reason for that is once you get them into salt water, to reuse them again, they're not really, you have to do a bit of work to them. So if you can avoid them getting into the water, all well and good. Michael, you told me this the other day, but the Dragons, NASA insists at this point that all the Dragons manned versions are new, but they will be reused and they'll be replacing the Dragon 1, the cargo models, with the new cargo versions, with the Dragon 2 as the cargo version. So Elon will be reusing these things. Okay, let's talk about the Space Launch System, SLS Orion. Some exciting stuff there because NASA are really bumping up the hype on this because they've got to, because it's cost them so much. But you know, it's an amazing rocket. Either way you look at it, it is an amazing rocket. There it is in graphics, and you'll notice there's a series of evolutions of this rocket. The first is what's called the Block 1. They want to get that going ASAP. It uses an old Delta upper stage, which is the cryogenic upper stage. And it's an interim, but they will be flying Artemis 1. I don't think it's this year. They still talk about it, but it will not be this year. It'll be more likely early next year. They will fly the Block 1 version. They will use an Orion capsule, and they will send it way past the moon. So that'll be something to look forward to, and it will actually be the flight of that first time of that rocket. The costs are anywhere between $1 billion and $1.5 billion. It depends on what you read and how you do the numbers. But what they really want to go to the moon to carry not just the Orion capsule, but also to carry equipment like a lunar gateway or potentially a lander of some sort. You really want the Block 1B derivative. But that relies on what's known as the exploration upper stage. It's an upper stage which has 4 engines on it, not 1, that the Block 1 does, and is more capable. However, they have to get the funding for that to develop it. I think, and I haven't checked this, with the increase in funding for the SLS, that may be on the cards to get that Block 1B version up and running as quickly as possible. And then you go into the various cargo modes.
Will that be Boeing produced upper stage?
Yes. Yes, it will be. So it's pretty interesting, but NASA already looking at buying more of these rockets off Boeing, but the relationship with Boeing is tenuous at best. No, they won't put anything. They'll never use that word max on anything again, I suspect. All right, and now the core stage has had its debut, if you like, out of the New Orleans plant in Michoud in New Orleans, just outside of New Orleans. And you'll see that it's made up of 5 bits. The base bit with the engines, those are Space Shuttle main engines, by the way. They were all flown many times on Space Shuttles, each of them. And they will launch them and drop them into the ocean. I think I said that last time. Then you've got the big hydrogen tank. Then you've got an interstage, and you've got the big oxygen tank above it, and then you've got an instrumentation unit. This is what it looked like in Michoud maybe a few weeks back. It was just getting ready to come out of the door. And then they had a dedication ceremony, and out the door it went. Let's see what she has to say.
Jensen, and I'm the Senior Production Manager for Final Assembly for NASA's Space Launch System rocket, and this is rocket science in 60 seconds. The core stage is the spine of the SLS rocket. Its 2 huge propellant tanks and 4 RS-25 engines provide over 2 million pounds of thrust to launch NASA's Artemis missions to the moon. Because of the size of the hardware, the core stage components are connected in 3 major joins. First, we made the forward skirt to the liquid oxygen tank to the inner tank to form the top part of the rocket, or the forward join. Then horizontally, we made the liquid hydrogen tank, followed finally by the engine section. To properly align the flanges as they come together, we use live photogrammetry on 6 bolt locations to make sure they properly align.
Who'd like her job?
Hi.
Hi, I'm Chandler Sherman. We're inside NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility here in New Orleans, where the Space Launch System's core stage is being built. This is Rocket Science in 60 seconds. The core stage is the backbone of the propulsion system that helps launch the rocket to the moon. Stages for the first and second Artemis missions are being built right here at Michoud in New Orleans. Green Run is a series of tests during which test conductors will bring the core stage to life for the first time. Propellant will flow through the cryogenic tanks, flight computers and avionics will operate all the systems, and 4 RS-25 engines will fire, all at the same time. Green Run testing formally validates the core stage's design, certifying it ready for launch. The next time the core stage hardware comes together will be on the launch pad at Kennedy.
And is coming out. So it came out of the plant and it goes into a big barge on the Mississippi called Pegasus, and then it's transported. No, it's Pegasus. Then they transport it by water to Stennis for its green run test. Moving on. Oh, that was the Pathfinder. That was the one they used to just make sure the launch pads were aligning correctly. That it all fit properly. And there it is inside Pegasus. What I like about this is you'll notice it looks like a stainless steel heat shield around the engines and around the bay. I'd never seen that till that came out. So that's an interesting. I don't know if it's stainless. I'm probably not, but it's nice and shiny. Sorry? Yes. It was. Here it is. Extensively for the RS-25 engine firings. Now they're going to put the whole of the core stage in the B stand to test fire it. Incidentally, that stand was used for the Saturn V's back in the 60s. Oh, huge. No, far from it. And here it is arriving at Stennis. And there's the B stand. That was all modified for this program quite extensively. There's some pictures. The barge is there. There it is lying on its side. There it is on its side. And here it is being lifted into position. We expect to see that maybe in April. They're going to fire this thing. So, Boeing. There it is. So in April we're going to see some flame and smoke, just like the 60s. Sorry. Now, in the meanwhile, a test article is at Marshall Space Flight Center going through structural testing. They're still progressing there. Let's go to Orion. Here we go. This is the capsule that will carry the men into deep space. The astronauts. It's not men and women. They emphasize that now. Man and first woman on the moon. That's. There it is. Now, Orion's currently at the Glen, what's it called? At Sandusky, I think it's called, which is part of the Glen Centre, and they are doing all sorts of vibration testing and thermal testing and electric EMF testing, etc. This, incidentally, is the service module for Artemis 3. Artemis 3 is supposed to be back to the moon landing mission, right? So we'll see what happens. Artemis 1, that's the profile. It will launch. I'm not going to go into that. You can get that from the net somewhere. But what to watch out for in 2020? Artemis 1. It's unlikely to launch. It may launch. It's unlikely to. But that money. No, it may launch. It might launch. It may not launch. However, it won't. But that extra money is interesting. Who knows what they've got? Because Boeing took a real shellacking over this, the lateness of this program. And there was a time when Jim Bridenstine, the administrator of NASA, was talking about, if you can't deliver, we'll go to our private mates. And so it not only put a... No. What happened after that was Bridenstine went quiet because not only did Boeing get upset, but so did the Congress. People in Congress got upset as well. So Bridenstine then had to be quiet. Go on. Yeah, but this will go beyond that. This is going to go way beyond moon orbit. Yeah. So there you go. There it is. Lunar exploration. The recent interest there. They've got this weird program. I don't actually understand it, but they've got a combination of small to medium-sized landers to manned landers, and they've awarded contracts to the small to medium, some contracts, and they're now putting in various scientific instruments. You'll start to see those landers starting to land next year. However, this is the manned lander, and we've got now 5 bidders. We've got Blue Origin, who leads the team, which includes Lockheed Martin, so very strong. And Blue Origin, if you remember, has been building Blue Moon for years. They've been working on this for years. So you've got to think that they're the front runner. Boeing decided that they're going to try an Apollo type thing. We've got to get the exploration upper stage SLS developed so we can put the lunar lander in with the module, forget about the gateway, straight to the moon. Makes the most sense, but if I know Boeing, it's going to cost a packet. SpaceX with an undisclosed plan. It'll be, Starship, but, it's undisclosed at this point. And Dynetics-led team was a recent addition. So very strong bids for manned landers, and God knows what they're going to look like. That's a blue moon on the top and the Lockheed Martin on the bottom. These various landers. Oh, this is a Russian something. The Russians are very keen to be involved in the gateway, so Roscosmos is still, they're quite happy to do it. One of these little missions that I was telling you about is going to be this thing here, Viper, and it will fly next year. That's its specific mission. Find water. South Pole's become very popular. So there you have it. So all the hardware gets built this year, and next year it's all on for young and old. What to watch out for? Well, China, of course. Moon sample return, Chang'e 5. Late in 20. They landed Chang'e 4 on the, still on the moon, still working, doing great stuff. It's the first time that humanity has actually put anything on the, well, I won't say the dark side of the moon. The dark side, the red side of the moon. So, and they're going to rely on this rocket on the right, which is the Long March 5, which they had some trouble with, but have since rectified the problem. And if we get to China, I'll show you the launch of this thing. But it's their heavy lifter to date. They're building a bigger one, but that's the one that they're relying on for their space station, their Mars sample return, lunar sample return, and Mars rover. Yes, Mars rover. So there you have it. I'm not going to go into great depth because I know that Andrew will cover these. Parker Solar, what to watch out for 2020. Planetary, Solar Parker Observatory. will get to the moon, to the sun in one of its orbits in the next few days, and it's the fastest man-made object ever. Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, it's 100,000 plus kilometres an hour. Something extraordinary. Hey? It was 85,000 miles an hour, I heard. What does that convert to? 8/5. There you go. I did say plus. So it's very fast. Solar Orbiter will be launched. Juno will go past Jupiter. Bepi Colombo to Mercury, but it's going to go the slow road to China, or to Mercury, I should say. It's going to be, doing the old hops between Venus and Earth. Parker Solar Observatory, Solar Orbiter, Juno, Bepi Colombo. UAE, the United Arab Emirates, are launching a Mars orbiter, and that's in July. They're launching from a Japanese rocket. Then we've got, of course, the flagship Mars rover, including the little drone, by the way, the little helicopter. That'll be something to see. And they are searching for life, as is the one below it, it's the ESA, the Rosalind Franklin ExoMars rover. I just put that in there because I liked it, but you reckon you're standing down at the beach, don't you? Not a blade of grass there. Amazing.
There's a picture of Melbourne last Wednesday night.
Some of us here would like to keep it there. But it almost looks like you're somewhere in Utah, or the Mojave Desert, or anyway. Moving on. There's the ExoMars, China's Mars rover orbiter coming up. OSIRIS-REx, asteroid Bennu, brings back samples. Hayabusa 2 brings back samples, and I'm sure, like it did, like Hayabusa 1. So I'm sure Andrew will cover all these, but there's some real exciting, interplanetary stuff going on. SpaceX, of course. What did they do over recent times? Launched the to the space station CRS-19. CSAT was launched in December, and Starlink 2. Here's a landing. Oops. That's not... Oh, okay, I must have mucked this video out. It's a nice landing, but seen one, you've seen them all. Hey Len? SpaceX Starlink 2 launch. Now, Starlink. Got to get your head around this one. They've got 180 satellites up there at the moment. They are the biggest satellite owner in the world, SpaceX. They're going to launch up to 1,400 satellites by the end of the year. 20 plus launches this year for Starlink. 12,000 have been approved by the FCC, but SpaceX wants 42,000 of them, and hence Len's comment about a Faraday shield around the planet. There's going to be a lot of them, but they don't last that long. They, a year or so, and then they deorbit. They're going to paint them black so they don't reflect, and you don't see fairy lights every time you go outside. I don't blame them. I mean, I think it's a serious issue, but it could make SpaceX a $120 billion company, because yeah, I believe it. I don't, and Elon's, look, why does he want this? This is his. No, but he wants this because he wants to fund his, ambitions to go to Mars. He wants to fund his spaceships and super heavies and all the rest of it. I read an article about the morals of actually going into space and then destroying other environments, because Elon's a big terraforming advocate, and depends on what side of the environmentalist side you sit on, whether you think that's a good idea or not. Anyway. Oh, here we go. That'll be a future debate. But exposing people who live on Mars to radiation levels which are nowhere near what they are here. They're real issues. There's a lot of moral issues that are going to come up. Anyway, let's talk about what he's building. There's Starship. Now, to bring you up to date, one thing about SpaceX is they are right in front of the public. When they developed the Apollo programs and all the rest of it, you didn't see half the tests and everything that was going on. With SpaceX, it's always live. You watch these tank tests and live. So he's constantly being scrutinised. He doesn't mind. He doesn't mind at all. Sorry? He does, absolutely. And the problem you have is to report on a night like this just what's going on, because every second day something's happening. But in Boca Chica in Texas, by the way, I put this up for a reason. SpaceX is on the coast, and there's a little hotel that's being built called Rocket Ranch. The way I get it, it's about 8 kilometres away. But you can go and stay there. They'll have a big observation deck and you can watch. It looks like it's in Mexico on the other side of the Rio Grande, but maybe they just get good tax deductions there. But they're building a hotel there, so you'll be able to go there, watch the super heavies going off once a week, and get really high on those flights. By the way, a year ago he had the feds down there looking at where to put the wall, so on his land. So, but there it is. This is some months back, but this is now they've got all these fabric built big sheds going up, and they weld these things under those, and they are all for testing purposes. And they've popped the few already. They just pressurise them to destruction to see how far they can get, and to test their welding techniques and whatever. They've done a few of these already. That was only about a week ago, and within a day of it coming out of the factory, it's being pumped up full of water and pressurised. This was a nose section, which, and I don't understand the dynamics of this, but I presume the water pressurises it, then it spurts out. As it spurts out, it creates a vacuum and compresses the metal. Yeah. Anyway, so
it's called hydrostatic testing.
Yeah.
It's quite common in pressure vessels.
Yes.
And it's done because if you use gas, the vessel will explode when it comes apart. With water, it doesn't, just breaks open.
Good.
That's one of the main reasons.
Yeah.
Hydrostatic testing.
So he's been doing a lot of that, and the reason for that, in the background he's doing that. In the factory he's building the Starship components for what's now called SN1s. I think, what's SN stand for? Serial number 1? Okay. But there'll be a number of them that they will be building. And at Cocoa Beach, remember the Cocoa Beach site? That's pretty much gone into dormancy. They're not using that anymore. What they've decided to do is build a little facility at Roberts Road. Where's Roberts Road? If you see that circle, that's where Roberts Road is. If you go down a bit, just south, you'll see the Visitor Centre, and you'll see pad VAB. Sorry, yeah, I know. Correct. Okay, that's Roberts Road, that corner. That's VAB, Shuttle Landing Strip, pad 39A, 39B. The current Slack 41, I think, where SpaceX launches, and we've got the Atlases launching there. We've got the main complex at Kennedy Space Center. We've got Blue Origin down here. So it's all there. And it makes sense because they were having trouble because they had their factory down here in Boca Chica. Not Boca Chica, in Cocoa Beach. And they had to get it across. Cocoa Beach is down here. But they had to get it to that pad. And that's the problem. So that's where they're going to build it. Yeah.
That's Cocoa town, and north of the freeway is the
Yeah. Titusville, just so you know, that's the Banana River, I think. And up there is Titusville. Down there is Cocoa. Cocoa Beach is down here. Merritt Island is down here. That's where I Dream of Jeannie comes from, down the bottom there. And there it is. There is. There's I Dream of Jeannie Lane, correct. Amazing. And there it is. So they've done work there. Launch pad 39A. How do you like that? Where they have the launch pad, there's 39A. They're building this platform. And that will be for the super heavies and spaceship launches. So there they are. It's all happening. Sierra Nevada. Cargo module for its Dream Chaser spacecraft will be known as Shooting Star. The module attaches to the end of the Dream Chaser and will allow the spacecraft to carry additional cargo. So they're making this a multi-purpose, multi-everything. Pretty good technique. There it is. That was one of the drop tests. That was a manned version, supposedly. But Sierra Nevada have not dropped the manned version. But they've got a contract under commercial resupply to go to correct, ISS. It launches in a Vulcan, but can be adapted to Atlas if the Vulcan, ULA's Vulcan rocket is not ready. It could actually go into a, dare I say it, a Falcon 9 too, I suspect. I'm not sure about the fairing size though. I think that's a 7 metre maybe, fairing. They're trying to sell this product to other customers, not just the American government. It has obviously the unique ability of bringing your experiments from the space station straight almost to the airport, local airport. A number of airports are buying for landing rights for these type of spacecraft. We'll see that flight next year. That presupposes Vulcan will be ready next year. By the way, that was a plan that the Americans stole off the Russians years ago. The Russians had a little vehicle very similar to this, and the first people that actually took pictures of it was in the 60s by the Australian Air Force out in the Indian Ocean when the Russians recovered it. And then the Americans started to copy some of the design. But then the Russians also copied the space shuttle design. So, hey, it's all... Sierra Nevada are quite a big player in the space game, so don't underestimate their ability to make this happen and do it well. There's the actual flight vehicle for next year. That's the cargo version. All composite fibre. Blue Origin. Jeff Bezos, he's the quiet achiever. He'll pop out of the woodwork probably toward this year. He will start to pop out of the woodwork. He's divorced. Oh, this was an old slide. Yeah, he's still the richest bloke in the world, I believe, even after the divorce. So. Wow. There is his these designs will change, right? The New Glenn design will probably change by the time we see it. but it is definitely under construction. So what to watch out for this year is first passengers will fly in the New Shepard suborbital. He's selling those for, hasn't disclosed that yet. To date, he's flown 12 missions of that rocket. So that'll be something to see. He opened up a research and development centre in Washington. Washington State. Kent, is it Kent? So there you have it. Not like Apple, but, you know, nice colours. Oh, Kennedy Space Centre. It's going up at a great rate of knots. I just saw a picture just tonight where that cladding is basically all the way to the top. This is Blue Origin, pad 36 at Kennedy Space Centre. They're building this.
Tonight, a towering addition now under construction on the Space Coast. It is the start of the tallest launch tower on the newest launch pad at the Cape, and soon it will help make this concept animation a reality. Blue Origin's founder is betting his billions on building one of the most powerful rockets ever imagined at Kennedy Space Center, then launching it just miles away. News 6 reporter James Sparvero takes a look at how it helps shape the future of space.
It is turning into a monster of a launch pad. It is going to be a beast.
That you can easily see from miles away of Blue Origin's Pad 36. We're zooming in from Port Canaveral. Here's how Blue Origin envisions it will look once completed. A 270-foot tall New Glenn rocket designed to refly 25 times.
The starting price tags to do really interesting things in space are hundreds of millions of dollars.
The richest person in the world, Jeff Bezos, put billions into Blue Origin, like the rocket factory near the Space Center where launch control will be. It's a massive 750,000 square feet, and even bigger than that, a new 90-acre expansion for more Blue Origin properties. Hundreds of jobs, paying close to 6 figures already here, and hundreds more following construction.
They've almost doubled their footprint. They're looking to considerably expand.
Dale Ketchum of Space Florida says Blue Origin also continues to grow its partnerships, like with NASA and its plans next decade to return to the moon.
Really is. That structure is about 250 feet high, whatever that is, but it's half the height of the vertical assembly building. So it's, if you know how big the VAB is, this is a monster. I'm over time here. Do you want me to stop at this point? All right. Paul Allen died, as you know, and his company went into a quick decline after that. They sold that biggest aircraft. I forgot who actually bought it, but someone will do something good with it. But then the most important part was that they were going to develop a suite of rockets and aircraft, hypersonic aircraft, and they've dropped out of that. But of recent times, they have said that they will keep themselves into hypersonics. See, hypersonics is the flavour of the month now. The Russians said they just deployed hypersonic weapons. The Chinese are working on them, and the Americans are not that far behind. So everyone's on the hypersonic bandwagon. This is an interesting one on that particular plane. It's absolutely amazing. here's another one that's coming up. I'll stop it after this one. Virgin Orbit. There's Cosmic Girl. It's a 747. It's got a rocket underneath it called Launcher 1. There it is. And it will fly this year. But also Virgin Galactic, which is a sub company. Its first passengers in Spaceship 2 fleet and White Knight 2 suborbital missions are probably going to fly this year. Spaceport America in New Mexico is where they will fly from. If you've got a cool $250,000, you'll be able to fly there in one of those. At the moment, they've got the Spaceship 2 VSS Unity, and they're building another one. Virgin Orbit will fly this year, definitely, and it's part of the small sat launcher brigade. There's a lot of them around at the moment. It will drop off the 747, and it will fly from the Mojave Air and Spaceport and launch just off the Pacific Ocean. And that's it. That's probably enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelo. Okay, we'll take a bit of a break, about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and then we'll come back with Shane and his Boomerang, Expedition Boomerang. Be interesting to see. How many? 204.
No, 276. No, that's all right.
That's all right. That's good. You got all the meaty bits.
I got the meaty bits, but there's some good.
Okay, let's go with part 2 of our meeting, and I'd like to introduce one of our members, Shane Usher. He's going to be talking about Expedition Boomerang. Thanks, Shane.
Thank you very much. Great to be here again. And start with an introduction I've given before, and that's that in 1969 humans landed on the surface. And in my lifetime, no one's gone beyond low Earth orbit. That's basically where we are now. But I do believe that in my lifetime, someone will land on Mars. I don't have any terminal illnesses at the moment that I'm aware of. So, yeah, my mission is to enable an enduring human presence in outer space, Moon, Mars and beyond. See what I can do to help that. There's a whole bunch of people who've been really excited about this for a long time, and that's the Mars Society. And Mars Society Australia has a number of people who have gone to Mars Desert Research Station in Utah and experienced some of the analog space mission that they have there. And what they wanted to do this year or last year, was to have an expedition which was manned by, or basically crewed by, an Australian crew. And that is Expedition Boomerang. This was 7 Australians and a Kiwi, and we went there in October, November last year for a total of 4 weeks. This is what it looks like now. What it did look like 20 years ago when it was first set up was just that, there we go, mouse is working, was just that habitat in the middle there, and a greenhouse. Not working? Okay. All right. No hand signals in this one today. So what we have here, this expedition, it had 2 sets of 2 weeks, where we had 4 crew members in the first and 6 crew members in the second 2-week block, and we had a total of 8 crew members. You do the arithmetic, some people doubled up. Spent a whole month there. And there was something that experienced, it was termed HAB disease, where people suffered from isolation from the real world and started to go a little bit kooky towards the end of those 4 weeks. One of those people might might be Guy Murphy, the person who coordinated the whole expedition. He spent a lot of time in the greenhouse and did start talking to the plants a little bit. No, she left after the first 2 weeks back to the real world, which is quite surprising because, yeah. So there's a broad range of backgrounds within the crew. Guy Murphy, who is the writer of Mars, The Survival Guide, about a decade ago, and it's amazing how much our understanding and expectations on survival on Mars and the like has changed just in that period of time. So when he wrote that book, the whole design was based on Robert Zubrin's idea that you would have a small capsule, something like the lunar lander that's been talked about. You'd send that there, and then maybe the Mars One idea that Diane McGrath was a candidate for. It still is, you know, technically. Okay, so the idea was that you'd send 4 people, then you'd send another hab of 4 people, you'd join them up and keep building. Elon Musk has transformed that idea to suggest that you send a bigger number of people, maybe a dozen or a couple of dozen people in a batch, which changes the whole social dynamic there, and most likely survivability, if you can actually land the thing. Me, I'm a chemical engineer, chemist, probably space enthusiast, you probably call me now. I have some ideas and some research going on in the background, but that's not what I'm talking about today. I'll talk a little bit about some of that. Larissa Wilson, a mechanical engineer who's just graduated from University in New Zealand. Jennifer Lane, she's a PhD student looking at the kind of environment or habitat that you'd have living in a space station or on Moon or Mars, looking at the environment and the comfort factor and the psychological effects. Andrew Wheeler, he's a geologist who's had a long-term interest in space technology, and he was a lot of use out there because of his background and in Utah, which is effectively like Mars in terms of the geology. It was a great resource. In terms of human factors, Dr. David Cooper from Hobart University in Tasmania, he had a mild heart attack just before we were going to leave, so he didn't get to go there. But we followed on with his research where we were collecting micrometeorites and looking at the exposure on the surface there. That was a bit of fun. So that's what we did. Steve Whitfield, Paramedic of the Year in Queensland. He tried to kill us at least 3 times and helped us to bring ourselves back to life. Diane McGrath, who a lot of you have heard of, was one of 2 Australian Mars 100 candidates. And Sandy Dance, a long-term member of Mars Society Australia, who finally wanted to get involved and see what it was all about. So this is what the station looks like, and it has a number of main zones, including the hab, which is the central living area, and the science dome, green hab, which is a greenhouse, an engineering workshop, and there's a telescope which is donated by Elon Musk. That's the solar array. So that's one of the 3 power sources there. Solar array, the diesel, and propane for heating. You probably won't have those sources on Mars. So this is there's something to mention at the outset, that this is not a full-on simulation. This is more of an exercise to put yourself in the frame of mind. So a couple of the crew members in our mock spacesuits there. The hab is a reasonably large area, probably a similar diameter to Elon Musk's Starship, ironically. Yeah. We each had our own individual cabin, which meant that there wasn't a risk of being in each other's faces too much. Could always be a bit of a recluse and go in there if being in confined quarters was a bit much. As you can see there's a little porthole. During the day when you don't get to go out to do other things, that's your view of the world. Kitchen in my ocean rowing voyage, on the ISS, anyone going into space will generally have these pre-prepared meals, dehydrated meals. Once you go to living in a situation, you won't be using the pre-prepared meal so much. You'll be using dehydrated ingredients and preparing the meal. And we're lucky that our engineer from New Zealand was also on the Great New Zealand Bake Off. I think she came 5th or something like that. So another great resource. So from these dehydrated ingredients, we had these fantastic gourmet meals. Absolutely. The toilet bathroom was with a hot water system which was offline and rationed water. It was actually a motivating thing for the crew. Stopped us being narky at each other to a certain extent, because if there's some other external forces or adversities, then it brings people together. So these were the rooms. We had more than one porthole that we could look out, and the view was quite good. We had atypical conditions to look at. So that view there of the mountain range doesn't have any snow. And at the end of the 2 weeks that I was there, it was snow-capped. And 1 or 2 days later, everyone was snowed in and people couldn't leave at the airport. And that's what it's been like there ever since. So we got the non-hostile conditions. And we didn't really lack for a lot of food. There was a lack of some things which we drained the supplies on relatively quickly. And to transition to each of the other areas, we had a closed-in section to effectively be going through tunnels. So as I said, it's not a genuine simulation of a vacuum environment outside, but it's get you in the headspace. So you can't actually go outside and do like that without getting into a spacesuit and waiting 5 minutes in the airlock and then going out. The facilities, this is the Science Dome. It's the amount of equipment that it had there, it looks like there's a bit there. If you're a biologist, it's all right, or a geologist having a look at some of the samples, but to do any quantitative research, there wasn't really much there. So if I'd known that in advance, I would have bought a whole load of equipment. But scientist wasn't my job there. I was a crew engineer, so I did some other things. And keep me away from the lab so that I wasn't swearing about the facilities. In terms of facilities, as I mentioned before, power was from solar and diesel was our backup. And the battery management was all automated. The heating was done through propane. And one of my jobs was to check all of that every night to make sure that we weren't going to run out. Now, not so critical when I was there, all the conditions were nice, but I'm sure right now where sub-zero a lot of the time, it's all pretty important. So this was the green hab, had a bit of, this was the start of the season, so we had to set up the plants so they'd be feeding themselves food later in the season. Now, another topic's EVAs, going out into the desert, spacesuit, make sure your air supply's on, otherwise you will hyperventilate. It's not actually supplying you with air, but circulation's important. It was a bit warm for us. Took a little while to get these suits on. and required help, so you couldn't exactly do it on your own. A bit like the ISS, it's a major operation for them to get them on. Then once they're on, get into the airlock, wait for 5 minutes, someone's got to be watching you, looking after you, and then you can go out. Once you're out there, we had rovers that you could jump into, electric rovers. Just make sure you unplug it before you go out and plug it back in when you're done. It's my job at the end of the day to go out of my own engineering EVA. So I had freedom that others didn't, because only a couple of people got to go out every day, but I got to do it every day, every evening, and check the charge, make sure that the rovers will be ready for a drive the next day. Off into the desert. Have a bit of fun, doing some experiments, collecting different geological samples, collecting micrometeorites on a grid, 10 by 10 metre grid, where in each square metre used a high strength magnet to collect the micrometeorites and look at the flux density over that area. 2 different areas, one comparing an area that wouldn't be exposed to water runoff in principle, and one that was basically a riverbed. See what results they come up with the 200 bags of samples to weigh and quantify, which you couldn't properly do there because they didn't have a proper balance. So all of that is to be done in Tasmania. So a few footprints there. We couldn't take the rovers off the path because it's all protected areas, so we had some reasonably long walks. But the rovers weren't completely reliable, and we had to walk back on one particular occasion. We're not exactly sure. We think it's because that rover hadn't been used yet and the battery wasn't properly conditioned, yeah. Yeah, my job. Thought that one out. But that leads on to one of my main observations there, is that you have a facility running for 20 years and there's people involved. This isn't like Cassini or Voyager satellites where as soon as there's people involved, things wear out much more quickly. Nothing lasts more than, something that lasts a year in terms of electronics and the like is long term. So the amount of redundancy you need in equipment is quite significant. And the geology is quite similar to Mars, I'm told. From my perspective, it's the same colour, but the mineralogy is very close as well. So we collected some samples of different materials that we could use potentially as a building material. We weren't allowed to collect much because of the restrictions that everything you take there you have to put back. But there were some really interesting samples. This is the engineering area. So this is a converted Chinook helicopter core. And this is our workshop. I would suggest that if it actually was on Mars, you'd need a spacesuit to be in there. Not exactly airtight. But good to have a play around in there. And one of the things that I had to do every night was check the charge on each of the rovers. The rovers were named after the rovers in. So this particular one that we have here is so there's Opportunity, Spirit, and Curiosity. Yeah, it's my job to fix the spacesuits when they stopped working. And I also got to see some good sunsets. And yeah, occasionally there might be some scary moments. So one of the great things about this was I was able to go out on my own. There was someone there waiting on the two-way, basically attending to my every move, and I'd call it in on the radio and the like, providing it was working. And now we come to our resident paramedic. Might be Queensland Paramedic of the Year, but he seemed to want to kill us on regular occasions. There were 3 major incidents that he conspired to create, and in one of them I was electrocuted outside and had to be carried back in. This was checking on the power cords of the ropers, of course. Another one, someone put a screwdriver through her suit and through her leg out on the expedition, and they had to bring her back. And another one was inside the habitat. Someone was passing out, and we had to determine why. And this was a test of a checklist. So we had a checklist to go through, and I was helping there, but I didn't actually get to see the checklist because it was on a I think some lessons learned. It was on a mobile phone, and the mobile phone screen went out, and not being my screen, I couldn't see it. I couldn't log back in. There's a whole bunch of difficulties beyond all the regular difficulties working in space in any kind of medical situation. As has been mentioned, just the idea of a blood clot on the ISS, the idea is, well, you send them back to Earth to get it treated. Virtually everything that's happened on the ISS, people are sent back to Earth. If you don't have that luxury, it's more of an isolation exercise where you have to deal with it and you know that there is no help. It changes the psychology. Fun. I say fun, but it was actually quite stressful at the time. You know, this isn't actually someone who's hurt, but to try to go through all the appropriate steps and procedures is quite stressful. And I wouldn't say that any of us coped extremely well in that situation, even though I think every single one of us had first aid level 2 training. That's all I really want to talk about today. Gone 43 seconds over time. If anyone wants to follow up on some of this, you can look at the website marssociety.org.au/boomerang, and that has a link to the actual Mars Society website, which has all of our journalist reports, daily reports, my engineering reports, which are the most dry things you've ever seen, which are just checklists and It's our initiative to be a part of that more than their initiative to bring us in. But we've had a long association with them. So Guy was part of, I think, Crew 4 or Crew 5, 19 or 20 years ago, and he wanted to go back to see how it had changed and evolved. And he wanted to have a whole bunch of new people who could tell other Australians what it's like and potentially inspire and bring new people out for that in the future. And from my perspective, it's to look at what are the shortcomings. Why hasn't this helped us to move forward? What are the things that we really do need in the future? And if we were to develop an analogue facility in Australia, what do we really need? And so David Cooper in University of Tasmania, he is soon to open a walk-in vacuum chamber. So that's with the Antarctic division, and that's potentially a fantastic resource in terms of getting us to be able to be used to working in that kind of environment, whether it's for small craft CubeSat certification, or whether it's for spacesuit testing, or just the ability to work at low pressures. I think it's a fantastic opportunity. Now, my personal goal is to get that kind of technology into the size of a shipping container so that every capital city can have one. Every major university around the world can have one, and then we can really be used to working in that kind of environment. Yep. Yep. Okay, so the Mars Desert Research Station would probably be one of the cheapest to operate in a sense. So it's all done on private donors and the like. So the simulation fidelity for the Mars Desert Research Station isn't fantastic. You really it's really about your own psychology and situation and access to a geological area that is very similar. The sandstone, what did you call it? The biosphere is a facility that is a simulant of a closed environment. So the whole point of biosphere is to be a closed environment, and the idea is that air doesn't escape and the like. You can't actually prevent that. But as an example of trying to have a contained ecosystem, it's a very good system for that. So the whole point of the biosphere is to be a contained ecosystem, and that's a very important part of the picture, because we as humans don't exist healthily long term without the natural environment to some extent around us. And Mars 500 was at the Institute of Biomedical Problems in Moscow, which I'm a candidate for. Potentially it was going to be on April Fool's Day this year. According to all of the advertising, that will start for the next 8-month mission, will start sometime later this year and stretch into next year. My proposal for rowing in space, last year they said they liked that, and just before Christmas they asked me to update the proposal with section numbers and a couple of extra sections before they send it off to NASA. So they're just taking their time a little bit more than the original plans, but I think the last mission was stretched out a few months as well. So it's just like rocket flights. The date always gets shifted a little. So the facility there is basically a bunch of pressure vessels, and the isolation is very good. They maintain a 3 kilopascal positive pressure, and they simulate depending upon what you're trying to work with, a 20-second or maybe a 20-minute delay in communications. So if it's a Mars mission, it's 20 minutes delay. For the Moon simulation that they had the last year's 4-month mission, that was a 20-second delay. Not exactly sure. But anyway, there was a delay. So every facility or analog facility has some aspects which seek to represent the real deal, but fall short in most of the other areas, and it's a psychological exercise from that perspective. One of the things that I noticed there was that everything wears itself down. So anything that humans touch will start to wear out. Whether it's your mobile phone that you drop and you need to have a backup for, the fact that communications don't necessarily work with the outside world because you don't have mobile access. Absolutely. I would suggest that if you're sending people to the surface of Moon or Mars, that you would have better creature comforts than we're exposed to there. You would have the most efficient equipment that you could send there. I mean, you can't afford to have dodgy equipment. The volume is probably too high for that, but the weight, it's perfectly dehydrated, so dehydrated food is the way it would go. You wouldn't necessarily be shipping all water. A rugged, tough type device. Temperature rated and the like. Yeah, so what they have at Mars Desert Research Station is Capcom. So it's basically a control system. So volunteers around the world each night communicate in I think it's basically a 3-hour window where we send off our reports and get back feedback on collecting it. So it's basically, it's supposed to be there as a communication point so that people don't go crazy. From our perspective, it was not deliberately, but yes. So it should have a delay, but no. So it's just a per person charge, which, if I remember correctly, was about $1,500 per person for 2 weeks, so double if it's a month, and I think it was half that for students. So it's not a high cost or anything like that, but you're not receiving a great deal of technology. So if you really want to do research on the isolation or any aspect of that, you've got to bring a lot of that technology. It is a drive to Hanksville, which is of, I think it's about 16 or 20 kilometres away. Now every crew needs to have a medical person, one of the requirements. Even from that perspective, if we didn't, I wouldn't have felt that safe being that distant civilization. Yes, you get into a routine. So for me, because I had that daily ritual of getting into the spacesuit just before dusk, waiting in the airlock for 5 minutes, having a little chat in person, finding something to occupy myself, like doing squats or seeing how many I could do, see if I could get a bit of fitness there in that time, then go out, and that was that little bit of out on my own in an environment which is quite it's quite amazing, that the natural environment out there, the red dirt, the skies were definitely a different colour there, as some of my photos showed. Yeah, so there was certainly a daily routine in that we had a water system which was very loud. So no one flushed between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. And as soon as someone flushed, everyone was awake. So we basically our days went from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And if anyone wanted to do other work or stuff later than that, they generally do that within their room. And that routine of everyone having meals together was a fantastic aspect to that. So that created the sense of crew, and that was a debriefing time as well, even though we'd have a formal debrief before that, usually before dinner and just after breakfast. But the routine worked well. Thank you very much.
All right, greetings everyone. Six days ago, and 50 years, there were a whole bunch of guys about to turn blue because they were waiting to see whether or not the first built Australian satellite, but second launched, had made it into space and whether it worked. Well, it did work, and Australis Oscar 5, 50 years ago right now, was being listened to by radio hams around the world and who are sending in thousands of reports on its what happened to it. It lasted several weeks before the battery ran out, and it is still in orbit and will be 10,000 years, perhaps even longer, unless, of course, it runs into another piece of space junk or Kerry Doherty goes up and gets it, or Gorman goes and gets it. Anyway, so a new version of this book by Owen Mace, a new version of this book is coming out in a couple of weeks' time, but you can still probably get this one in the bookshops. Now, my talk today is made of three parts. First, we're going to give a look at the missions that are already in space and what the status of them is. And then we're going to have a look at the Trojans. You'll find out what that is in a few minutes. And if there's any time, we'll then look at what's going to happen in 2020 and beyond with planetary missions. So, that's the game plan. And you're not going to read that now, but basically, I'm not going to do the recent ones. The current ones we'll be going through quickly, then the break, and then the near future and far future. Now, near and far is a bit rubbery, so near is within 2 years or 3 years, far future is beyond that. Okay, so we're only going to talk right now about the missions that are actually in space and are still operational as of yesterday. First of all, solar and heliophysics. We've got SOHO, Stereo, SDO, IRIS, Hinode, and the Parker Solar Probe. SOHO still going strong in its 25th year of operation now, and it's orbiting the L1 point, Lagrange point number 1, which is 1.5 million kilometers towards the Sun from the Earth. In other words, it's 1% of the distance to the Sun. This picture I downloaded yesterday. You can get the pictures every day, every few hours, or every few minutes they come in. And that's yesterday's one at 13:13 Universal Time. Now, so SOHO's working well. The two stereo missions, one of them failed in 2014, but the stereo A is still returning excellent data, and again, you can download its pictures. And it's in heliocentric orbit at a distance of 1 astronomical unit. And I'm forgetting whether A is preceding or trailing the Earth. No, it's varying. They're varying. Okay, like that. So if the Earth's here, they cross. So at some point they go behind the sun. Now, and of course the Solar Dynamics Observatory is in operation. Also in operation is IRIS. It's an ultraviolet imager of the sun, and it's 7 years now into its planned 2-year mission. And it's in Earth orbit and studies the sun and gives quite nice data. The Japanese mission Hinode is launched in 2006. It's now in its 14th year, and it studies the solar magnetic fields from Earth orbit. Okay. And here's an example of a Hinode image of the solar limb, and it also does nice pictures of the sunspots. The Parker Solar Probe it's not quite touching the sun. It was launched in 2018, and here's a picture that was released a few days ago showing the solar wind moving away from the sun, and you'll notice Jupiter moving into the view as well. It also takes nice pictures of the stars and things like that as well, and measures the magnetic field, and from that you can tell coronal mass ejections and things, and also rather curious zigzags in the solar wind, and they're trying to figure out why is the corona hotter than the surface of the sun. Okay, and that problem has been, numerous satellites have tried to address that issue, and we're still not too sure, but the Parker Solar Probe is on the hunt. Now that's where it is right now. Well, sorry, yesterday, and it's approaching perihelion. So it's the closest point to the sun. It'll be closer than any spacecraft's ever gone before, and as mentioned earlier, it's going really fast. Okay, and it's going to have several more adjustments on its orbit when it passes near Venus in the future. Now, going to Mercury, we've got Bepi Colombo and Mio on the way to Mercury, but don't hold your breath because it won't be there until 2025. And it's got to do some Venus and Mercury flybys in the meantime. As for Venus, there's only one spacecraft operating at Venus at the moment, and that's Akutsuki. It was launched in 2010, missed the planet initially, and but 2 years later they managed to get into orbit. It takes images in all sorts of spectral range, and it's in orbit around Venus with a period of about 10.8 days. And it's taking animations like this soliton wave here in Venus's atmosphere. Now onto the Moon. We've got Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, Chang'e 4 and Yutu 2, and Chandrayaan are the two craft that are currently operating on or around the Moon. And Chang'e 4 and Yutu are on the lunar far side, and currently it's just entered into their second year, and both the lander and the rover have survived 13 lunar nights now. And they relay the data back to Earth via the Qingbao satellite, which is sort of further out. Here's a recent map of the rovings, where it's been, and it's broken the longevity record that was set in the 1970s by Lunokhod 1. So it now holds the record for lunar roving on the Moon. Okay, and they just woke up a few days ago on January the 18th and to their next day. Here's a Chinese map showing the roving. Oh, the other point I should mention there, on January the 3rd, the Chinese released 105.5 gigabytes of data, including lots of images, and people are now going wild on the internet, like this one, saying, yay, we can stitch together all sorts of panoramas and fisheye views and so on. So that's good fun going on there. Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is still in operation, now 11 years into its mission. And this is a Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter image, I say, because it's actually a compilation of images. But it makes one point here. You notice that we've got the Aitken Basin, which is where the Changi 4 is, and the South Pole. And that big basin around that you can see, the darker area, is called the South Pole Aitken Basin. And that's going to be the attention of many of these missions that NASA and other people are planning to land on the moon in the near future. So what? Yeah, I can see the X there. It's I can't remember. Anyway, Chandrayaan-2 is returning absolutely spectacular data. Here's one of its images, and it's not only doing sort of almost global views, but also doing very detailed views. But most interesting of all are the radar images it's doing. And here is an example of how that's done. And there's another radar image taken by Chandrayaan-2. Now, off to Mars. We've got all these craft operating on Mars at the present, so it's quite a popular place. Mars Odyssey, named after Arthur C. Clarke's story. And it's a synoptic survey. Doesn't get much attention. It's now in its 19th year, and you can go to the Goddard Space Centre's website, and you've got hundreds or thousands of images that you can download. Sorry, did I say Goddard? JPL. And but they're not as detailed as, say, Mars Express. And it's now been operating now 17 years. And Maven, and it's adjusted its orbit last year and is now set up to do relay duties for Mars 2020, if and when it arrives there. Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter is now going 15 years. So it's been going 14 years and it's now in its 15th year. And again, I won't go show you any of the pictures that it's taken. And but it did detail, it found where Beagle 2 had landed, showed an image of it, showed that all but one of the panels had opened. It showed us nice pictures of opportunity from orbit. It showed the Phoenix lander actually landing, and so on. The Indian mission, in English called the Mars Orbiter mission, is now in its 6th year. This is one example of the pictures it's taken. And it does some nice 3D views with the data. Back in India, they reprocess the images and give these nice views. So here's one of Marinus, Mariner Valley. I rather like that picture. On the surface, we've got the Mars Science Laboratory, and Angelo has just shown us a wonderful panorama and so on. It's climbing Mount Sharp at the moment. And the ExoMars Trace Gas Orbiter is now doing some really splendid science. Here's an example of the things it's looking at. And the other mission on Mars is InSight. It hasn't gone quite as well. They've got both the probe and the seismometer on the ground, and the seismometer is doing well. But unfortunately, the probe's got a few problems, and they've basically figured out there's not enough friction in the soil. And what it does, it sort of hammers its way in, and then the hammering sort of dislodges soil, which gets underneath the probe and pushes it back out of the ground again. So I don't know that there's going to be any solution to that. So it looks like that's a failed part of the mission. Time will tell. Now, going further afield, we've got the WISE mission, the Wide Field Infrared Survey Explorer, and it was looking for brown dwarf stars, as well as things in our solar system. And the helium coolant ran out in 2011, and then at the urging of Congress, they repurposed the mission, and it did find that. I was hoping they'd find a dwarf star closer than Proxima Centauri, but no. What Andrew wishes for doesn't always happen. So anyway, those are some of the closest red dwarfs to us. And so the repurposed thing is now called NEO-WISE, and it's still operating and has detected thousands of asteroids, including dozens of near-Earth objects. Hayabusa, we talked about a lot about that last year, and it's now en route back to Earth for a landing late this year in the Woomera Prohibited Range. And hopefully it's got some more samples than Hayabusa 1 did. This is how the departure went. It's ion propulsion to get themselves away from the asteroid and head back towards Earth. Meanwhile, in a similar mission, OSIRIS-REx is currently in orbit around the asteroid Bennu, and they have chosen the sample site, the first sample site. They may do more samples, but the first one will be Nightingale, and that's probably going to happen in August. And it's due to depart from orbit around Bennu in March next year, and should deliver its sample back to Earth in Utah, land in Utah in 2023. Now out to Jupiter, we've got Juno and Hisaki. Juno is in orbit around the planet Jupiter, and it has a very highly elliptical orbit, and which gives a very low perijove. And the next one is on February 17, that's perijove number 25. Then the next one, number 26, is on April 10, June 2, and so on through the year. Mainly a particles and fields mission, but of course getting a lot of attention have been the Juno cam, the sort of almost an amateur camera on board the spacecraft. Hisaki is in Earth orbit, doesn't get much attention. It was launched in 2013 and is studying Jupiter and other outer planets in the extreme ultraviolet. No, it's not at Jupiter, it's near there. But the data has allowed scientists to recreate and understand what's happening with the magnetic fields and the magnetosphere of Jupiter and come up with artist's pictures. It doesn't make pictures like this, but allows scientists to then make artists' impressions of what you would see if you could see the magnetic fields. And here's some more data about what this quite remarkable mission does. It's a Japanese mission. Okay, now to the Kuiper Belt and beyond. We've got Voyager 2, Voyager 1 and New Horizons. And Voyager 1 keeps chugging along. Should probably last another 5 years, maybe another 10 years. No one's quite sure when we'll lose contact with them. But they're both now in interstellar space, definitely in interstellar space. The other mission out there, of course, is New Horizons, and did pass Arakoth a year ago, and is now searching for another Kuiper Belt target. And you can see there's a whole lot of objects out there, and it's got a telescopic camera, and they're looking to see if there's any target they could fly by. Otherwise, they're characterizing the things out there, getting things like brightness, the albedo, the rotation rates, and things like that. Now, exoplanet missions, we've got TESS. It's got 4 large cameras, and it is doing an all-sky survey. It's got a rather unusual orbit in that it doesn't need propellant to stay there. So it's in an orbit that takes it out near the moon and so on, and it hangs in there. And so it should last virtually forever. Forever is a long time, of course, but for a long, long time. It's not limited by propellant or anything like that. Now, it's each speck in this photograph is a star, And at the right, it shows the Magellanic Clouds. And what they're looking for are slight variations. As little as 2% in the brightness indicates perhaps an exoplanet. And other things as well, like supernovae and things like that show up in these pictures. So here we go. It's done the southern hemisphere scan, and this is the result of the scan, and it's now turned and it's now doing the northern hemisphere. Meanwhile, in astrophysics and astronomy, we've got these missions in orbit at the moment, and so the Hubble's still going well. Chandra, it's now been going, 20 years? Pretty good. XMM Newton, it's been going also about 20 years. And that's in a highly elliptical Earth orbit. And then gamma ray astronomy is done in a 3-day Earth orbit, launched in 2002. And it uses a shadow mask to photograph gamma rays. And it doesn't make pretty pictures, so it doesn't get in the news. It's more spectral and so on, but it does allow you to work out where the gamma ray sources are. And this is a map of the Milky Way. Spitzer Space Telescope, launched in 2003, and the end of mission is in a couple of days' time. Finally, they're going to switch it off. And there are a number of reasons for that. One is it was expected by now the James Webb Space Telescope would be in space, and it would take pictures in the same sort of spectral range, but also it's a contact issue, which I haven't got time to explain now. Okay, it's just going behind the sun, basically. And New Star, launched in 2012, now 8 years into, it's 7 years now into a 2-year mission. And it's, as I said, nuclear spectroscopic telescope array. And Gaia is in halo orbit around the second Lagrange point. That's the F-Sun Lagrange point. And it was launched in 2013 and is expected to go for another 2 years. So there we have it. A summary of the current missions. Now, if I can work out how to get myself out of this by closing the close box. And I'll click that close box as well now. And I've been talking about Lagrange points, a number of things, and I'm not going to explain fully what Lagrange point is now, but I'd like you to watch this little movie. One of those things, is it? Okay, so I've got to get it somehow across into the... While that's happening, there is asteroid in that and our little movie here shows this mission called Lucy. It's going to go out to points. And take a look. Pointer, make it easy. Take a look. Yeah. Right. Take a look at motion of one of these. Now, when it's inside here, it's going to go faster than Jupiter. Now, this picture's based on Jupiter. There's Jupiter there. That's the sun. So look at the ones here. They're going that way. They come out here, they go that way. So they are orbiting the Lagrange point. See the ones on the other side over here. So they're circling like that. But it's interesting. They're not just in the plane. They're also above and below the plane of the we'll call it this. So, yeah, there's another thing in here, and that is, you'll notice this asteroid here. That's called Donald Johanson. And he's the guy who discovered the Lucy fossil in Africa. And the ice is named after him. So the mission is named Lucy. And you notice that it does a flyby of the thing. Flyby. Down here and do flybys of 4 here. And 2 for go back out. So you've seen that picture several times. So see if okay, let's see if I can do. I've got 2 more to show you here. Go under the rest of the book, but I can't get it to. This has gone blank. That screen's gone blank. Second movie. Now we're looking in the plane of the ecliptic. The orange dot is Sun. Earth is green going around. Here's the trajectory. 5 past 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we head back across past the Earth and out to the other Lagrange point, and we meet the next asteroid. But look at the motion of these asteroids as they this is over, well, you get the time frame in my next presentation, but over about 5 years. Okay? So you see that the motion is quite interesting. And so when you're planning this trajectory, you've got to figure out that you're not just going to aim for the Lagrange point and hit there and on. You've got to go up above the ecliptic, past that thing, past another one, whoop around there. So it's a very complex mission. After this, because the animation stops at that point, after this it comes back and another thing, and there's a possibility of an extended mission onto more of these asteroids. Okay, now, sorry? The green one is the Earth. We're in Jupiter's frame of reference. It's a little bit different, but now let's quit that. And the last one is that's Donald Johanson. And here we've got the names of the other asteroids. Fly by past the Earth again. Target. All right. So that's it. Is there what? Not much, but there will be some. There will be orbit, trajectory corrections on the way. All right, let's quit that and go into my second PowerPoint, which there are 29 seconds left. Okay. Let's quickly move through. Right. This year and the next couple of years, what we expect. Solar Orbiter is going to launch on February 5. That's it being in Europe before it was shipped to the United States. And it's going to have 168 period orbit and come down to 0.28 of an astronomical unit. Mercury and Venus, nothing's planned. Chang'e, we've got these missions here. And Chang'e 5 is going to launch in December now. And sample return. Lunar flashlight will launch on Artemis 1 whenever that happens. And use the laser to look into the dark craters. Chandrayaan 3, they've started construction on this, and it's going to be a lander and rover and a detachable propulsion module. It's going to be basically a rerun of what Chandrayaan 2 should have been. Remember, the orbiter is working, but the lander Vikram failed. Yeah, and orbiter as well, yeah. So basically, it's a rerun of Chandrayaan 2. Now, on Mars, we've got these things coming up this year. So the name is going to be announced very soon. They've got a final list now. I've got my favourite in it. Well, I mean, I haven't got a name in it. Only Americans could enter this competition to name it. It's done a centre of mass spin test. Okay. And it's going to have a helicopter. That's the actual flight helicopter being tested. And it's going to land in Jezero Crater. And for comparison, there's the Columbia Hills over there. And there's a Jezero Crater is a very fascinating place. The landing sequence is a bit different from the Curiosity landing, the Mars Science Laboratory, in that it can adjust its path on the way down to take account of bad terrain. And that's going to be important because they're landing in a very rough area in Jezero. So they want to make sure they don't hit any nasties on the way down. All right. Hopefully the engineers have fixed up the wheels that they had problems with on Curiosity. And ExoMars, landing in Oxyoplanum. It's going to launch this year but land next year. And the rover's been named Rosalind Franklin for obvious reasons. And the lander is called Karachoc. Okay, so it's got the lander, named the lander as well as the rover. The Hope mission from the Emirates is going to launch in July on an H2 rocket from Japan. And that's it under construction. And it's an artist's picture what it will look like in Mars orbit. China is sending one that's being developed in Macau, which is the former Portuguese colony near Hong Kong. And they're doing an Earth mission as well to study the South Atlantic anomaly. So anyway, that's going to be heading off sometime this year. Meanwhile, the solar system bodies, we've got these missions due away sometime soon. The Didymos mission to study the binary asteroid. DART should be launching in October of this year, and we'll get there in 2022 and smash into it, the smaller of the moon, the Didi moon. And then Hera will follow, launching in 2023 to see what damage was done by the impact. The Neo Scout is a flyby. It was going to be launched this year, but it's now been put off to next year. And the Destiny mission, again, has been put off for at least 2 years. Going to go to an asteroid called Parthenon. This is the Lucy mission I've just been talking about. And how it's going to fly through there. Okay, there's the Lagrange points. And there's the dates. You asked me how long is this over? Well, you can see from the first pass in 2027, it's going to be 6 years before it gets to the last of them in L5. Psyche is a mission that launched in 2022, target the rich asteroid, and metal-rich thing. Jupiter, we've got JUICE, and to Saturn, we've got Dragonfly. The JUICE is launched in 2022 and should orbit Ganymede. And it's solar-powered, so it needs big solar panels. Dragonfly is quadcopter. It launched in 2026, land in 2034. This has been approved during the year. Now, here's where I got a bit curious. The mass of Dragonfly is 450 kilograms, which in the gravitational field strength of Titan, which is 1.35 newtons per kilogram, means it weighs 610 newtons. But it has a power from the RTG, the radioisotope thermoelectric generator, of only 70 watts. You say, how can a thing like that, 450 kilograms, fly with that much so little power? Well, the atmosphere of Titan is 95% nitrogen, 5% methane. The temperature is pretty cold, minus 178 Celsius. The pressure there is 162, or about 1.5 times the Earth's pressure. Right? The gravitational field strength, though, is only 1.35 newtons per kilogram. So I guess the people who are doing this have done their maths and they can fly it. All right. Exoplanets, the only funded mission is Cheops, and it was launched last month. And the computer was booted up on January 8th. They took some test images with the cover closed. And I'll just point out, that's the camera. This is the cover, not a second eye. The cover that flicks open. They've taken some pictures with the cover closed, test pictures to see, okay, we don't want any white pixels and so on in this. It should be just totally black. And then they're going to open it. They were going to open it on January 27, which is today. Yep, today. But it's been delayed a few days to do some more tests. All right, let's move on. It's not a hunter for looking for exoplanets. It's going to be characterizing known exoplanets. So what TESS has found and what Kepler has found, that is what it's going to be looking at, what's known already, but they're going to characterize them. Now, astrophysics and astronomy, we've got Euclid, James Webb, Spherix, and WFIRST. Euclid launched this year, looking for dark matter and dark energy. It's an infrared telescope. It's in Earth orbit. James Webb, well, it should launch in 2021. They've scheduled it for March 30 of next year. We'll see what happens. They've mated now. I haven't got didn't put in a picture of it. Mated now. They put the actual telescope with the solar, with the sun shield, and it's being tested. Spherix, quite a complex mission going in 2023. WFIRST now slipped to 2025 and might slip even more. This has been on and off in Congress and so on. But it's going to be really amazing. At the top here, that's the area that the Hubble Space Telescope can image in one picture. This is what the WFIRST can do. 100 times more than Hubble. And what's more, it can do that in 1,000th the time that Hubble would take. And so, this green area here, cyane area, is the area that Hubble has surveyed of the Andromeda Galaxy over many, many years, taking photographs. and they've stitched together into this wonderful panorama. W first will be able to do the same thing that took Hubble many years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 18 pictures. All done in a very short period of time. It is going to be an amazing telescope. And they try and kill it off every year. Yeah. W first. Okay, looking into the far future. Now, far in space business often means just a year or so. In chronological order, we've got those things. So let's push through fast before we get kicked out of here. The fast is 2023. Spectro. Okay, that's a spectro. And Chang'e 7 will do a comprehensive survey of the lunar south pole and determine where Chang'e 6 will land. Chang'e 6 is a sample return mission from the South Pole. Plato is looking for exoplanet formation. How do exoplanets form? And it's got lots of telescopes pointing in different directions, so it doesn't have to point one and then the other, It can look at a whole lot at once. Ariel is a bit further in the future, 2028. And that's looking for exoplanets again. Chang'e 8 in 2027 will test the technologies needed for a human base on the moon. MMX, the Martian Moon's exploration mission. The idea is to land on Phobos, collect a sample and return it back to Earth. And there's an artist's impression of how it will look approaching Phobos. It could land on Deimos as well. And so arrive on Mars in 2025 and come back to Earth in 2029. Athena, that's the physics mission. Mars sample return is still in the hopes. SLIM, 2022 is now the date that's suggested for that. And here's a recent picture of how it might look. It has a landed mass of 210 kilograms and do mineral characterization, but the main thing is a technology thing to prove that they can sit down in complex areas safely. The Lunar Polar Exploration Mission is launched in Japanese fiscal year 2023 and should return samples by the gateway if the gateway actually ever happens. Heracles, again, it's another Japanese technology demonstration mission and to bring samples back to Earth. I leave out many of the other proposed lunar missions because it's all up in the air at the moment, or sorry, down on the ground on paper. Paper spacecraft. So XRISM is another JAXA mission. The Japanese are doing a lot of good stuff. And so here's our little summary then of what is planned over the next year and the next couple of years going forward from that. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Ashley, for all the hard work you put into tonight. Thanks to our speakers, Angelo, Shane and Andrew. And our next meeting is on Monday the 24th of February in this same place. So hope to see you there. And yeah, thanks for tonight. Bye.